Today, you're going to be learning about note investing and how Sierra Davis paid off $60,000 in student loan debt.
I tell people all the time, like 99% of people probably have never heard of note investing, but 100% of them have probably been on the other side of that. Might be like a shocker. You don't have to buy a full note. You can buy partials of the notes. You can create paper out of thin air. It's basically what it is. I don't know if there's another strategy that allows you to have that much passivity.
Sierra, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
So I don't know much about note investing, so this will be really exciting to share with everyone who's listening because I think it's a strategy that sounds obscure, and so
Yeah.
people just won't know how it works. I'm actually genuinely interested in learning about it, so hopefully I can be that bridge for everyone who's listening to kind of help everyone understand what this is and how it works. But before we get into how this strategy works and really get into the tactics of it, I'd like to go into people's background a little bit because it kind of helps set the stage for what kind of person they are, what they learned, what they were exposed to, what their mindset was like growing up and going through college if they did, and then seeing how that transitioned into real estate and the kind of frameworks and mindset and everything that kind of built into the foundation of who they are. I found it to be very, very interesting, just as much so as the actual real estate investing strategy that they're using.
Yeah, I love to kind of share my story and hope that I can inspire people to kind of look at this in a different way. So, like Ben said, my name is Sierra Davis, and I'm born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. And honestly, my story may be similar to a lot of people, but a little bit different. And so, I was always an analytical person. So, in college, I majored in computer science and in information systems, and one of the things that I like to do is, code. And so I was able to program things, and I got into my first real job out of college and doing that. And so actually got put into a position where I just learned about data. And so how to analyze data and how to extract it and transform it into share it with different analysts at the time. And I, you know, got into that field of data, and we think about AI today is like on the cusp of that, and really just focusing on how to get better. And so, of course, I got my MBA and moving up the corporate ladder. From there, just making prediction models and really just like thinking through how to solve these different difficult problems. And I love tackling all of that. And so, when I was doing all of that, I realized you're moving up the corporate ladder, but also you come out with a bunch of student loan debt. And so, if you've been to college, you probably have the same exact student loan debt. You might have a good paying job, but that really got me to thinking about investing and how to pay it off faster than what they were telling me to do. And so that analytical brain of mine kind of thought about it and started searching for different ways. And I'm excited to share like that journey and during that process.
I think that that's really interesting that you majored in computer science and then you had exposure to machine learning and AI. You probably understand what's happening right now with this AI revolution better than most people. And I would bet you that you're probably using AI in interesting ways in your business today, if I had to guess.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm definitely running agents and making sure that I use it to my advantage more than anything in my business now, which is pretty exciting. Everything is changing, right? There might be a new model coming out, once you're hearing this episode, but it's more about just being educated and keeping things more simple for you. And so if you're not using AI in your business, I would highly recommend it because the folks that are using AI in their business are, you know, 10 steps ahead. And, I would don't want anybody to miss out on that. Just to start with the basics is really important. But yeah, I use it all the time.
Would you be able to share? I think a lot of people are using AI as like a chatbot, like whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or whatever they're using, and they're asking it questions and they kind of treat it like Google, but with more concise answers. And so I'm curious if you could kind of explain to people, what are AI agents and what kind of tasks you have them doing in your business and what does the cost look like so that people can have some kind of an idea? Because I think AI agents and kind of having AI act like an employee that works for you, it's not something that people are doing really right now. I'm sure it'll be much more normalized in the next few years, but this might be really interesting for a lot of people.
Yeah, so in my business, I'm using, some like AI agents. Basically, an agent is something that works in the background doing some type of work. And so it can be scheduled at any time of the day. Let's say if you do a task all the time. I like to, tell people write down a task that you do manually all the time. And so see if that, AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or other AI software can help you do that, on an automatic, process. And so that's kind of where I'm doing now is saying, hey, every Sunday I get a, AI agent just runs a little job for me to give me all like the latest news and finance or business, and then I can like synthesize it for content, for example. Or I'm using AI agents to kind of help with, making sure that I have everything in order for my folders. So note investing is like a bunch of paperwork and a bunch of files, and so being able to organize them with the help of an agent, where I don't have to spend time on it, I'm getting my time back. And if you think about like the cost analysis on that, you might be able to kind of spend less money um, doing that while you can do something else. And so that's where the benefit is that you have time to go do the real work, the really cool things that you like to do, versus sitting and organizing folders that's mundane, or sending reports that you do all the time. So right now I think like the Claude Pro is like $200, but you never know if they're going to increase or decrease, but make sure that you kind of keep it in your budget. But that $200 might actually help you cut down costs with maybe an assistant, or a VA that you're looking to hire. So that's what I would say.
I think that because I haven't used them yet in my business, and I probably have the kind of business that it would make sense in some ways, and for a lot of other people, people may or may not be able to use it in their corporate jobs. Maybe some of them do. Some of them might have access to it that their employer's paying for it. I mean, you just feel like that's going to happen at some point where it might be one person who's managing 10 AI agents, and then those entry level employee roles for a lot of white collar jobs might kind of be at risk, especially if there's any kind of repetitiveness to it.
Yeah, and I think for me, I tell people like use it as guardrails, like especially with underwriting and doing those tasks. I always look over, things like that. So I would say like some of those businesses and corporations are using them to speed up things. Maybe they had like 10 people doing one job, and maybe they figured out one, adding AI. They don't need 10 of those people, but they still have the people that might be able to kind of work with like those AI agents or those different tasks in a better way, but always using guardrails. So uh, it's not the definitive answer. I always recommend checking and using some guardrails to make sure that you are still doing the things that you would do on a normal basis.
Got it. I appreciate you sharing that. It's really
Yeah.
useful insights. And I think a lot of people are not to the level of AI use to where you are. So it's really cool to kind of get your perspective on, where things are going, because
Yeah.
things are going to be probably trending that direction for people. So kind of getting back to your story, you started studying real estate at night, like flipping properties, rentals. You found a book on no investing. What did you learn in that book, and why did you feel like you were kind of drawn to that? If
Yes.
it would be considered an asset class, I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe,
I
or
would consider it as,
strategy.
yeah. I would say I would consider it an alternative investment, or, asset class. Um, I think for me that what stuck out to me was the ability to, the book kept making references to this mailbox money and being the bank. And that got me like, huh. Like I got like my ears was like perked, and like I'm looking at this thing. And so um I didn't have to go inside a property. I didn't have to go on the MLS and look through a bunch of different deals. That was a little bit a different shift. I didn't have to go to auctions and tax deed sales and things like that to get distressed property to, renovate it. And so this attracted me a lot, especially being busy, being busy and wanting to invest, but not necessarily wanting to use all of my time. And so that was like, oh, okay, I think I can get something, started with this and be able to do it. And I've been hooked ever since.
And you left your W-2 in April of 2025, so it's been a little over a year that you've been doing real estate investing full time, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Was that a difficult choice to kind of leave behind the corporate job? I mean, I don't know what your income was like, but if it was six figures, I would imagine. If not, it was probably close to it. So replacing that, I mean, you're probably wanting to make $10,000 a month or more through real estate investing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it was a for me, I had started, like, years ago, preparing for that moment. And so while I was working, I was, investing. And so I think the important thing for me was being able to stack my notes. And so basically, have one note, then another note, and then having the ability to keep stacking that income to where it then made work optional. Being able to kind of think about, I like to think about, if you had a budget, right? um, well, can this note pay my car note? Well, can this note help me with like grocery bills? Very simple things like that. And so being able to kind of get up to that point allowed me to say, okay, this is good. And then um, one of the things that I was interested in doing is like, okay, how do I scale this? Because I like doing it, and I'm interested in doing it at that point of April 2025. I was scaling at the time, but it felt like two jobs. And so I was like, well, making six figures here. My husband had a very steady income as well. So I knew I had insurance. And so I was like, oh, this is a no brainer. And so I've been scaling ever since. But I think it was important for me to start from a place where I was comfortable and then just kind of think through all of that before I left.
Okay, got it. And I want to define a couple things here.
Yeah.
So, how would you define what a mortgage note is and what does it mean to own one? And then from there, we'll get into some more of these kind of like, subtopics and bullets underneath that, because there's a few other things that kind of attach to that topic after people understand what a mortgage note is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell people all the time, like 99% of people probably have never heard of note investing, but 100% of them have probably been on the other side of that. And when you're getting a property, if you don't pay for it, all cash, typically you're getting some type of financing. And you might go to the bank or you might go to a private lender, whatever the case might be. But let's say we go to the bank and get a residential property. During the closing, you sign two documents. That is a promissory note, so that outlines the loaned amount that you are getting to purchase the property, the interest rate, the term, all of those things. And then it's outlined, what happens if you don't pay, what happens, all of that. And what is a mortgage is basically secures that investment, that promissory note, rather. And so that is basically the outline of the security instrument that says, hey, this property is secured by this mortgage and the promise to pay. And so whether what state you're, depending on what state, that might be a deed of trust or a mortgage. And so those two documents that a bank will create can then assign those documents to another bank or an investor.
Okay.
So that is particularly how you hold a note. So in the language of the document, it says, this is a bill to assign, sell or assign to another entity um, at any time. And so whether that's performing or not performing. And so that's where um, that paperwork and that language means to basically invest in notes or hold a note.
And what can the numbers look like on these in terms of, like how many of these can you do per month or per year? And then how much are you having to put down or invest? And then what does the rate of return and the monthly cash flow look like so that we can start to add a little bit of context around what the numbers look like on these?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of like the capital, so it is I would say it's a capital um, intensive strategy. So, like for example, you can go from as low as 5,000 to upwards of, millions of dollars. It depends on the unpaid balance on the asset. And so let's say you owe $80,000 on your house. And so being able to invest, basically investing, you're looking to purchase the balance of that note secured by $100,000 house, for either a little bit of a discount. So you might not pay 80,000, but you might pay like 75,000. And so if you're thinking about the rate of return, right? A lot of the notes are secured. Have an interest rate between 2 to 10%, and so depends on when it was. So like if you're talking about like COVID, those interest rates are about like 2 to 3%, right? And so if you're thinking about a 3% interest rate, you're going to have to get a little bit of a steeper discount, and so your rate of return kind of reflects on the discount that you're able to purchase that unpaid balance.
Interesting. So you basically hold the paper and you kind of have the mortgages for a bunch of houses, and the
Mhm.
people that like own these houses and live in these houses, they're paying you every
Yes,
month. And
exactly.
that's
I'm the
actually
bank.
so you're basically acting like you are a bank.
Yes.
And how the heck do you get these from a bank so that you're the bank?
Yeah, so it depends. And so I tell people a lot of the times the bank is typically uh, offloading or selling distressed assets. And basically, a distressed note is maybe delinquent 90 days or something like that. So they're not performing. So I typically don't go directly to the bank to purchase these notes. However, on the secondary market, there are investors who do hold these notes across the country, that might have been originated by the bank, and so they might have purchased them, whether it was performing and they got a reperforming back on track, and the borrowers continue to making these payments, and then they're able to sell those. Or, in the real estate investing world, I love to go to seller finance notes. I'm not going to the bank. And so there's thousands upon thousands of these seller finance notes right in your local meetups. People are, carrying back these notes that I don't know that they can actually sell them. And so think about like the time value of money. Instead of waiting 30 years to get your full, investment back, maybe you sell it in a year and get a lump sum to do it over and over again. So there's two ways to get these notes, but I think the important thing is to kind of get educated on where they are.
This is interesting. So I kind of like to take, because our podcast covers all of the categories of real estate investing,
Mhm.
I have kind of taken a really interesting approach to look at, all the different types of real estate investing, how active or passive they are, how capital intensive they are, what the rate of return looks like, so that people can really think about what they're going to do. Because what I've noticed is people will kind of get interested in a topic and then pursue that and do that. But I like to kind of provide this higher level perspective that people can look at, where they really have a menu of options and they can
Yep.
decide what strategy they're actually most interested in that they want to do, so that they're making intentional decisions based on, I have information that I'm making decisions based on, not just because my friend told me about this or I heard that this is working right now. And so what does the how active would you say this is on the front end, or during, after you purchase these notes? And then what does the rate of return look like? I'd be really interested to hear about that, because we've recently did an episode on land investing, and I'm kind of curious. I'm sure it's a lot different, but I'm kind of curious, like, what these numbers look like. Are you getting returns like your cash on cash returns? I would have to imagine is the primary metric that you're probably looking at. But you have an MBA and you majored in computer science. You did analytics. Like, you'd be the person to tell me, like, what kind of analytics and metrics are you tracking, and
Yeah.
what does the rate of return look like on these? Maybe on average, the high end, the low end. I think that would be really interesting for people to understand.
Yeah, so I think for me, I love this industry and this strategy for the the time freedom and location freedom. And so if you're thinking about like levels of passivity, I think this is at the top, and especially within like the real estate sphere.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
yeah, so all I need is my MacBook and a phone, and so I can do deals on my, on the couch. I don't have to go step into a house. I don't have to go to a property. I
You
don't
don't have
have
to go to
to.
foreclosure auctions or tax auctions or anything. Like you're not going to the courthouse steps to try and find ideal like in person,
Nope.
raising your hand, being like, "I want one. I want it. I'm bidding on it."
No, and so I can be anywhere in the world doing this very thing, and so um, I, get deals from brokers and deals from like marketplaces, and look at those and do my underwriting, do my deals. I can go get a title report. They send it to my email. I can go and find someone who has boots on the ground and you do like a BPO, which is broker price opinion for me in any state. I have notes that states and I've never even been to ever, and um, being able to have attorneys and things like that. And so, if anything, for me, it's more looking at deals, underwriting them, getting them getting them to a servicer, and I use a third party servicer. And so the third party servicer handles the borrower communication in the payments, and so basically they ACH me the payments every month. And so yeah, that's pretty much it for me. So I spend about you know on average maybe 20 hours a week looking at my portfolio, um, to see who's paid, who's not, and making sure the communication is going smooth with borrowers. But yeah, it's super minimal. And if you think about a lot of people, they have their mortgage payments on auto pay, right? So um, and I buy performing notes, and so it's a little bit less active than non-performing notes, which you're kind of working with the borrower to get them back on track. And so that might be a little bit more of active. But even then, you're not doing any property maintenance. You're not doing any checking in on anything like that. And the cool thing about it, the expenses are low. I pay $25 a month, and that's it for per month per loan.
This episode is brought to you by Easy Street Capital, the lender built by investors for investors. Whether you're flipping, building a rental portfolio, or executing a ground up construction project, Easy Street has 3 nationwide loan programs designed to close fast with no surprises. We're talking 24-hour closings, upfront terms, and in-house servicing from start to finish. If you're ready to fund your next deal, go to easystreetcap.com/launch REI to get started, or you can grab the link in the show notes. Most real estate investors I know are overpaying in taxes simply because their CPA is reactive, not proactive. That's why we recommend TrueBooks CPA. They specialize in year-round tax planning for real estate investors, depreciation, cost segregation, entity structuring, and their clients are always surprised by what they were leaving behind. Do yourself a favor and find out what you're missing. Go to the link in the show notes and book a call with them. Okay, so this is interesting. Like there's something here that I have to know. So, okay, let's say that I'm just making this up. Pretend that I'm like I want to do this, okay?
Yeah.
And so let's say that it's capital intensive and a lot of people don't understand you can find capital partners to do capital intensive things in real estate. This is so important for people to understand, and it doesn't get talked about enough because a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't do multifamily. I want to buy a 1,500 unit building, but like I can't save up $500,000, or I can't do self storage because I can't save up $200,000." You don't have to do that.
Yep.
You can have 20, 30, 40, 50% of a deal, and you can find capital partners through
Yep.
networks, masterminds, meetups, wealthy friends, family, coworkers, acquaintances, anybody, but you got to know what you're doing. Or oftentimes people that know what they're doing that do this full time, can even function as capital partners or have capital partners in their network.
Yep.
So, if you don't have the money, let's just use an example. If you don't have the money to buy an 80K mortgage note, this is what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Because do you have to buy these in cash? And then if you do, and you're getting paid monthly payments, how would the numbers work? Because if
Mhm.
you're buying a mortgage note, I'm
Mhm.
making it up for $80,000, and if you're only getting paid, you're making 6.5% interest or something like that every month. Like, I just don't know if that's worth it enough
Yep.
because if I'm borrowing 80K from someone as a capital partner, they're gonna want 10% annual returns, maybe 12. So
Yeah.
those numbers don't work. So I'm trying to understand the rate of return
Yep.
versus the cost of capital to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think I mentioned before, like, so if the interest rate is 6.5%, I'm not going to purchase that note at the balance. I want to make sure that my return is either between 12 to 15% yield.
Okay, interesting. So you want so you say 12 to 15% yield, like the in terms of like the payment that you're getting annually based on what you paid for it.
Yep,
So
exactly.
would that mean that if somebody bought a mortgage note for $100,000, you should be bringing in 12 to $15,000 a year for you? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, basically. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you have to a lot of the guests that we've had, we're trying to reconstruct how can this strategy make ten to $20,000 a month with real estate investing in a way that is scalable and you can do it yourself reasonably easy. Nothing super easy in real estate, like unless you're investing in syndications like I have in it. That is awesome. But even that requires a lot of work on the front end. I'm sure this
Yeah.
does too. Like you probably had to put in hundreds of hours of learning
Hmm.
before you were able to do this and make it passive and
Yeah.
easy on the back end. But
Yeah.
I'd like to understand. Okay, so are you borrowing money at like 8% to then buy these properties, but then you're making 12 to 15, so you're making the spread
Yeah.
and then you can scale that up. You could do an infinite number of those as
Yeah.
long as there's that big gap between the yield that you're getting on these deals
Yeah.
and what you're paying someone to help you buy these deals. Is that right? Or am I
Yeah.
making this up incorrectly?
No, you're I think you're spot on, and I think for, to step back a little bit more, like, if you think about a mortgage, payment, that kind of reflects how much the actual borrower put down, and actually the term. So, the shorter the terms, the bigger the payment, the monthly payment. And so the
Oh,
longer the
interesting.
term, the
Okay.
shorter lower the payments. So if I am, I can get paid $1,000 a month on a note that I bought for $6,000. Why? Because it depends on what they agreed on at the closing table.
Oh, that is really interesting.
And I don't have to buy it when they made it. I can buy it at the tail end.
I'm thinking about you having this as like a 30-year mortgage.
So if a person has a 30-year mortgage, I don't have to buy it when it's 30 years. I can buy it when they have like 3 or 4 years left.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting.
So
There's
their payments don't change.
okay. So there's a
So
lot of creativity,
absolutely.
optionality. There's kind of like a game to this. There's a lot of
Yeah.
strategy
And
involved.
so for me, I look at yield for as my base, but I don't necessarily look at yield for what I want to do with my life. Like for replacing your income. So if if a note pays $500, I can go get with $25 my expense. I can go find another one the exact same cash flow and have 1,000. So I don't have to have a bunch of notes.
Mm,
I'm looking at the cash flow, and if I do work with a capital partner, I'm making sure either we might do a split or a partnership or 70-30 or something like that, as I'm scaling. And so it's more so about, what are you optimizing for? One, are you optimizing for yield, or are you optimizing for actually, the cash that's going to be cash on cash return based off of what you've purchased? And that's kind of key for me, and the strategy that I've used, and looking at this from a loan to value or an investment to value standpoint. And basically what that means is that, if the value of the asset, whether it's land, whether it's a single family mobile home, whatever that asset is, I want it to be high, a strong value. And so if I'm going to invest, I want it to be lower than 75%. So I want the unpaid balance or the loan to be um, low, so that I can then have a good extra strategy in case something happens. So
yeah, so you're putting in margin there. That's the same thing that we actually see with land investing and
yep,
probably a lot of other types of investing too is that's a margin of safety that you're putting in there.
yep, exactly.
You
Yep.
you bought a note in Kansas City
Mhm.
and it was paying you like clockwork for 3 years before she bought it, and then you had a borrower that defaulted. What happens in those situations?
Yeah, so I think for me, as you learning about this, if a borrower stops paying, the first thought is to freak out and like, oh no, what am I going to do? Especially if you're looking for the cash flow. But the interesting part is because you put in your buy box, you put in your guardrails, making sure that you know exactly all of those things in your metrics. You don't have to panic and there's options, right? So there's a deed in lieu of foreclosure, for example, where they, don't want to go through a foreclosure process and they'll give you the deed of the property as a lender. There's a short sale, whether they pay off some, just to get it off, and you might take that and as an option. And there's another multiple different ways of modification. And so once the ability to have this go like clockwork, then it stops. You have to kind of think about your options. And so I thought about, my options on what I could do with the property. And so the property value had increased a bit. And so instead of like panicking, I took some advice, talked to my mentor, and then resold it on seller financing, and which became one of my greatest deals of, to date that allowed me to pay off my student loans. And so,
That's awesome.
um, you know, I like the ability to think about seller financing, which I think is like the top of it, right? You can get paid 3 times, and so I like to tell people. You can create paper out of thin air. It's basically what it is. So you can sell a property, do the paperwork, carry back a note mortgage, and get a down payment. You might get 10 to 20% down. Then you start getting monthly payments. And then maybe within 3 to 4 years, you would sell that note and then you get paid again. And so being able to do that and recycle it over and over again is really really cool strategy. And so being a buyer of these notes, I do see it all the time, and it's really cool. And I think I wanted to kind of share with your listeners too. Might be like a shocker. You don't have to buy a full note.
Hmm.
You can buy partials of the notes.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So let's say you don't have $100,000 and maybe they owe $100,000. Maybe the sellers interest, say, hey, I'd be open to buying 5 years worth of payments. And so you'd be able to buy 5 years worth of payments, get a whatever return that you're interested in to make that offer. And then once those 5 years is up, it returns back to the original. And so you've getting your cash flow, your loan to value and your investment to value is like diminishes because you're um, only more buying, portion of the note. And so the value of the property is still higher than what you invested in. And so that's a really cool strategy too.
It's really interesting because just as we kind of hear about and go through different strategies of real estate investing every single week, what I'm learning is each kind of category of real estate investing is like its own game.
Hmm.
It's like if you had 5 different board games at your
Yep.
house, and each one has different language, different words, different terminology, a little bit of different rules, and they're all kind of unique and different, but there's strategy involved with all of them. You
Hmm.
can get really good and make a lot of money from any of them. And you just have to really sit with this one strategy for months and months and months and months. And oftentimes people have a mentor or something like that that they're learning from who's been doing this for a long time. And, they they eventually learn this and then they get so good. They know it inside and out. And many of these strategies turn into something that go on to make millions and millions of dollars. I mean, we've had people that with their own strategies have made tens of millions of dollars within individual niches of real estate investing. So it's super interesting, and there's definitely some more things that we're going to look at here. I mean, there was one that I think you resold via a new contract
Hmm.
for deed 75,000, 15K down, 60K financed at 6.5%. New borrower paid off early in August of 2023, a $37,000 payoff. What did things kind of look like for those, if you can remember?
Yeah, I think for me, I think it was, pretty simple. When I'll open up. I sell people like buying or selling rather on seller financing or carrying back some type of note or contract for deed. It does open up your buyer pool. And so there's a lot of people that cannot get traditional bank financing in this country. And, it's unfortunate what happened in 2008. I understand those things, but there's a immigrant population or people or entrepreneurs who just, can't get financing because of the situations that they have. And so, but they do have cash on hand. And so, this particular um, lady who, was interested in this, I didn't have to go fix up the property or anything. She was like, "Okay, I'll do that myself," and put 15,000 down. And been able to pay that over some time. And then, one day you get a call and say, "Hey, I'm ready to pay this off." Was my payoff, and so that was like the first time I got a payoff before. I think it was a 15-year note, and so that was like, oh, I had never seen this. This was like I think about it was my second deal I ever done. And so, I was really excited about that experience. And what I think about it the most is that um, if I would have rented to her, she would have not got equity in her home.
Oh,
And
I
I
see.
love that because if I'm basically creating this note, I'm not the homeowner. She's on the deed. She has the interest in that. And so she gets the mortgage interest, she gets all of that afforded to her. And so $15,000 got her in the door, and then monthly payments where the property increased. I don't know if it's probably worth 100 and 20 something $1,000 now. But if I would have rented to her, she would have gotten nothing. And so I really
Wow.
think that is a powerful way to look at it because I always want to make sure that there's win situations. And so um, this kind of it also attracted me to this industry is because instead of being a landlord, I get all the benefits. I think this is shared benefits.
And I believe that you've had a 100% invest to repayment record
Yep.
since 2018. I didn't know that you'd been doing it for that long. So
Hmm.
you actually did this for 7 years before you started doing it full time.
Yep.
That is really, really interesting.
Yep.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Because like I said, I wanted to start just to pay off my student loan debt. I didn't think about it as a business. I just thought it like there's extra income. But as I grew more and more and buying more notes and across the country, it really became, a full blown business. And I was able to scale that. And so I think I took 7 years to build out systems, build out, relationships, build out, all of these things so that it was basically plug and play once I was able to quit my W-2. And it's been, really interesting to seeing how the trajectory has gone. And it's funny because in all of those 7 years, I didn't talk about note investing to anybody. And so it took me like a year and a half to actually, make social media posts about it and kind of educate people about it. And so um, I enjoy it, but I think that 7 years kind of, like, allowed me to be diligent and use systems and really have a mindset of, being able to work with borrowers, work with investors, as well as being able to just be with my family more. I think it's a really, great, way to kind of think about it, because I didn't jump right in and then quit. I liked my job, a lot, and so I thought it was an opportunity just to make some extra money, but it turned into something much more bigger. So it's super cool to do now.
And you left your six-figure W-2 job with a son who was under 4 years old. What did that
Yeah.
feel like for you when you know, left and you put in your 2 weeks notice?
Oh, it was like it was joyous. It was bittersweet. Like I said, I was really good at my job. I didn't have any like bad performance. I was moving up really well. But I think it was like a bet on myself and bet on my family and being able to spend time with him. We can just go on a random Tuesday and do something. And I think that was, really encouraging. And hopefully he kind of like sees some of this and he's, for now, but documenting this journey with him, and seeing how it's been going, and making sure that he knows what entrepreneurship looks like and things like that. I think it will be rewarding once he kind of gets older to see all that.
Oh, for sure. And I have a feeling that you'll have him in this business one day.
Oh yeah,
You'll be teaching him about real estate investing for sure. Um,
absolutely.
this really feels really closely related to seller financing.
Mhm.
We've done some content around seller financing, and it just makes me wonder, like, could you see yourself kind of using these skills to eventually maybe get like a mobile home park or something like that, where you find some kind of I'm trying to think of other assets that seller financing is the most common in. Like, I don't think it's as common. I'd have to really ask kind of our core people on multifamily self-storage and
Hmm.
all the other things. But it just makes me wonder, like, if you had a seller financed property in a vacation market that then you could Airbnb, or if you had a
Hmm.
seller financed mobile home park or something, like, I just wonder if these skills could apply to like some larger deals that just like really churn out cash flow, or if this strategy is just so good and you're so good at it, then even if you're doing deals that you've got 30%, capital partners got 70, or however you structure it, you
Hmm.
could just do like hundreds of them. I mean, that's what we saw with land investing, where, this person's done over 6,000 of these deals. It's made tens over $10 million,
Hmm.
which is just insane. Like, you don't even need to do anything else,
Yeah.
when the revenue's like that. And so you're getting better and better at this every year. I can't even imagine where you're going to be 10 years from now with this. You're probably going to have 20 exit portfolios as you have today.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where, like, the goal for me is, my 3-year goal is to make sure that this is the thing, like, the one thing that I do. But at the time of, like, 3 years and however, my multi-million dollar portfolio is at that time, I definitely, want to invest in other deals and invest in other people, because I wanna be an investor in their deals too. So, I think that's really important for me, and, um I think you're right about, like, the different skills because, it's a you almost have to be creative with these as well, have to be really analytical too, and so, I work with, individuals who are doing, like, structuring their seller finance deals, whether they're land, self-storage or mobile homes and things like that to see, um, if it actually would be a sellable note, So, I think that's really cool, way to think about it, and yeah, like I said, I think it's more like doing this one thing and then getting to where I'm able to invest in other people, invest in other deals. And so I'm really excited about that. I'm looking forward to doing a bunch of other things and but like I said, I want to scale this to maximum as much as possible.
What do you wish that you knew in year one when you were in the early stages of learning this? What do you think is the fundamentals that people have to know so that they don't make mistakes, they don't lose money, before they start to layer on some of the creativity and more advanced strategies in note investing?
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely going to be like knowing you can read all the books are not going to change. What's important is to get into it. Because if you don't get into it, you're still going to be on those books, and the books don't tell you everything. And so, one of the things that learning by doing was super important. Um, and have to get a little bit, do it scared. But I think if you have a mentor or someone that has done it before, it is super helpful to do. And then like thinking about like exit strategies before you buy. It's super important to know the different laws. They all, very different states to state, different cities. It could take a super long foreclosure process in one state and super quick in another. And so be prepared for an exit strategy in the beginning, because if you're not kind of thinking about like the worst possibilities, and having like a checklist to say, okay, this is what, I do all the time. Make sure I look at all these things. You might get stuck when something happens and that you're not prepared for. So I would definitely recommend, sometimes you just got to do it scared and then making sure that you look at, all of the extra strategies and being able to know exactly what's, the ins and out of different state laws are.
Do you think that note investing can work in any market? Do you do it all over the country, or have you found that there's certain markets that work better than others?
Yeah, so that's really great question, and so I think it works primarily really great all around the country. And the reason why I say this is because it kind of depends on like the rental property market. And so I think the standard is like 1%, ratio. And so if we look at that, that cash flow in terms of like if I put the same $30,000 on a down payment on a DSCR loan versus buying a note, it's going to cash flow two times more on all simulations that I've done. And without the expenses, and so without, like, the random, HVAC going out, and so, I definitely think that in markets where the rent is, above 1.2%, which is probably a little depending on where it is rare, that's where it probably doesn't work well, but, I mean, at this point, right now, we're seeing the numbers, and the numbers, continuing to beat, rentals, across the board.
If you kind of look at note investing and compare it to, you know, land investing, short-term rentals, multifamily, self-storage, mobile home parks, all these kind of core types, or single-family rentals, all these core flipping, all these mainstream kind of areas of real estate investing. Do you think that note investing is better in terms of, passive, scalable, cash flow returns? Do you think that note investing is better than, hey, I've got a mobile home park, I've got this 500 unit self storage facility, I've got this big 500 multifamily, but then, you need management in place. You've got to manage 500 units. It can burn down. You've got property management and tenants and repairs and capex to manage. Do you think that note investing is better than like real estate investing? Having the
Yeah,
paper is better than the asset itself?
I think that's a really good question, and for me, that answer was yes. How I think for anyone who's, like, listening, I think you kinda have to ask, like, what are you optimizing for? And so, I think for those other strategies, they're great because they're kinda depends on what you're optimizing for. So, if you're optimizing for tax strategies, note investing doesn't have any tax strategies, and so,
Oh,
they don't have any tax
that's
benefits.
interesting. We didn't even
And
touch on
so
that. Yeah.
and so, like, mobile home parks, I would, that's a good strategy. What I would say is that I would add node investing to your strategy instead of, like, going one over the other. Because if you're looking at the cash flow, it's always gonna hit the numbers. It's just strictly, numbers cash flow wise. And then you have your tax benefits, whatever those might be, depreciation, all of those things. And so it's a compliment, in my opinion. I definitely think it's a compliment to what you're already doing. And, you don't have to let it go. But I definitely think that for anyone who um, doesn't have, isn't necessarily looking for like those tax strategies yet, I think is a good place to start because if you're not ready to handle a big flip, if you're not ready to handle a big expense, I would go with this because like I said, my expense is $25 per loan per month and my servicer handles all the borrower communication. I don't know if there's another like strategy that allows you to have like that much passivity.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's really interesting. I
Mhm.
might say so far based on, the conversations we've had, which is now 30 something episodes here. This and land investing so far might be two of the more ones that really stick out for the ability for scaling really strong, recurring, pretty passive income. You've got to get good at the game on the front end and you have a lot of learning, but that's with any
Yep,
of these. It's going to take a
exactly.
few hundred hours at least,
Yep.
maybe 1,000 hours over the course of a couple of years to get good at it, but then you're good at it for the next 30 years and you can make millions. So this is really cool. I'm really glad that you've shared this. We're going to link your content and everything of how people can find you below in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you guys subscribe so that you don't miss any of the shows that we have coming up so that we can continue to reach a wider audience to teach you guys about real estate investing. Sierra, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
If today's episode was useful, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. We drop 2 episodes every week. And if you want to go deeper, join thousands of investors getting our free weekly newsletter at newsletter.launchrei.co or check the link in the show notes. See you next time.